Good, Jan? Okay, good morning, guys. I'll do my best in the next 20 minutes to summarize about 7 years worth of stuff that happened. But first of all, thank you. You probably have no idea how uncommon this is, but I've already heard a few times this morning people mention that they follow along with what we're doing, that they pray regularly, that you guys were aware of different things that have happened in the last year or so with some of our friends and some of the challenges that we were going through. So thank you for your faithfulness in that. That actually means a lot. It really does. Like to come, and we aren't spending tons of time together where we have great friendships all the time, or we have tons of history together, but we're engaged in what is happening in this among our friends here in Konomala, and you guys have a real part in that, even just in trusting the Lord with it and choosing a posture of depending on Him as He works in these people. Because we're there, I know all of these guys. I've spent countless hours with all of these, with our friends here, and yet it's not me working in them. It's the same dependence that I need to be living within. Sometimes I'm not. Now there's a whole sermon series on that. But choosing a posture of dependence on God as He is actually the one working in people, we get to do that together. So thank you for that. Thank you for tracking. Thanks for reading the emails that come. It's actually not very common that people even read those. So good job. You guys win. So anyways, like the guys were saying, my name's Seth. Yes, many generations. Actually, on both sides of the family, Roger. Do you know that? On my mom's side, I'm third generation too, so it's ridiculous. Me and my family serve over in a country called Papua New Guinea. These are our girls. That's my wife, Caitlin. That's Natalie, Lauren, and Olivia. They are spending Mother's Day with Grandma today, so that's why they're not here with us. But along with our coworkers, this the family on the left there with their two boys, that's Luke and Eleni. I don't know if any of the emails those names have ever come out. They are actually, as we speak right now, they are sleeping in a hotel in the capital city on their way back in. So they also are kind of based out of the central Pennsylvania area, and just a few days ago they left to go back into Konomala. So there are all kinds of challenges facing them right now as they go back in. The logistics are turning out to be a total nightmare for getting back in right now. But they're on their way back in to re-engage with the church that's there. So for you guys, geography nuts, or if you have no clue about geography, this is there to help you. So there's where Papua New Guinea is in the world, right above Australia. And then within the country, we live on this little island called New Ireland, the super long, skinny one there. And on that island, we live down at a place where everyone calls it the last corner. All of our friends literally call where we live the last corner, because it kind of is the last corner. It feels like when you round the corner, you're about to fall off the edge of the world. You are way out there. And we access that by road, actually. So way up at the top of that island is a little town about 8 or 9 hours drive away. And that's where we get all our food and all that kind of stuff. So if I am able to rip through all of this, which I'll try not to, I'll leave time for questions. Otherwise, we can talk till 5, like Roger said. So we got plenty of time. Oh, sorry, it's loud. This is what our community kind of looks like from the air. This is the only time we ever flew in a helicopter. It was amazing. Those are our two houses right there. Okay, sorry. Wow, that's impossible to talk while that helicopter's flying. So that's kind of a literal bird's eye view of what our community looks like. It's not a village. It's not a lot of kind of the romantic, extreme looking places that you maybe see pictures of. That's a community school right there. The one in the video, there's a timber company off to the side, a Chinese timber company. Our houses kind of flew over there for a second. But that's kind of what it looks like. There's the dirt road that we get to drive on for a lot of hours. But just for imagination's sake, this is what our house looks like on the outside. This is what our house looks like on the inside. It has I'll show you a little video clip afterwards if you want to see. But our home, we built this in 2000 after we saw you guys last. We went to PNG the first time in 2018. Then in 19 built our house, moved into Konomala in 2019, had a COVID time, came home, had a baby, etc., locked down with COVID. All of you remember that very well, I'm sure. And then for the last few years, we've been plugging away at many of the tasks that have been before us. So that's what our home kind of looks like inside. Little schoolroom. It's a great house to raise our kids in, to try and raise them as normal kids as much as possible. I'm sure you guys have met a lot of missionary kids that are maybe a little bit, like, not really sure what happened to them. We're trying our best to raise our kids to be sort of normal humans, and our home is a big part of that. So it's still the best kitchen we've actually ever had in any house we've lived in. But no, can't get into too many details of all that. Once our houses were built, and really the last, after going back in for COVID, after COVID, we spent a solid year finishing learning the language, the local language that all of our friends speak, kind of their culture and the way they live life and how they process things and how they view the world. And it was a lot of this, sitting on tree roots. I think I'm sitting on like an air filter for a forklift or something there. Many, many hours of being friends with people, being together, and bashing our heads into multiple languages and trying to learn all of those. So once we were able to finish all of that, there's stories upon stories that I wish we could talk about that would be fun. But this guy's name is Michael. I'll show him a few times throughout the morning, and you'll see a video of him at the end that I think you'll appreciate. But spent a lot of time with different people in the community to learn their language and to kind of grasp how it is that they see the world, so that as we got to this point where we kind of called out for a few of our friends, just some of the guys initially, we opened up the Bible and started walking through Scripture with them. Now, as we were doing all of the integrating into the community, we realized that their local language that they speak is what we would have viewed as their heart language. That would be like the main language they speak. But we found out that there's actually a second language that the whole country speaks. It's called Pidgin, that our friends all speak perfectly as a second mother tongue to some degree. And there's already a full translation done in that language. So because a lot of our friends are very religious, religion has been on this island for like hundreds of years, couple hundred years. 1800s were initial like European missionaries came. So denominations are everywhere. We have 7 or 8 different unique like church denominations in our community. So very religious, very educated, access to town, access to the outside world. Already everybody has Bibles. Everybody grew up in church, confusing church, but church, stuff about God. So a lot of that led us to do some things that were different than we expected to. And in this case, that was one of them where we got to actually use the full Bible that had already been translated into that national language that all of these guys speak. Actually, the guy holding that green Bible there doesn't even speak Konomalan. He was a timber company worker, and he just showed up that day. He only speaks the trade language and then his own language from somewhere totally different. And that's a super common situation. So when we sat down with these guys, we started walking through Scripture with them, and I would love to explain all the nuanced ways that this happened, but really we hit a massive wall right away with these guys. And it was right in Genesis chapter 3. Chapter 1 and 2, everybody's happy with, yeah, God created everything. Okay. Now we tried to build in much more about who God is, who we are as his creation. He is the good Father for all of eternity before, and out of that sourcing, he creates people to be his children and have this intimate relationship with him like he had with his son for all of eternity. So building in the new identity of who God is, a new understanding. He's not this distant kind of angry stepdad who's just waiting to smack you if you screw up. But then chapter 3, we hit a massive thing, which we did not know. We knew something was there. We had no idea how big it was going to be, to where what all of our friends grew up understanding in church was that the tree and the fruit and Adam and Eve and the nakedness and all of that stuff is all just imagery for bad stuff, immoral stuff that happened. That's what the big thing was. There was immorality that happened in the garden. And that's why God reacts the way he reacts. That's why they're ashamed. It's all just a big picture. And for our friends, that was a hard one to get by. That as we were looking at it, and as we're just seeing what God describes there, it's actually has nothing to do with immorality. It has everything to do with a heart issue of Adam and Eve choosing total independence from God, choosing to be on their own. They can know. They're the ones who can act. They're the ones who, we don't need you to tell us what's good and evil. We can know. It's us, it's our position now to take the position of God and act in total independence. And then this small little action of taking that fruit and ignoring what he says and choosing self over him is just revealing what was going on in their heart, and that is the source of all of this brokenness. So our friends weren't super into that. That was very hard for them to understand or to accept. 3/4 of those guys after that 2 weeks of just every day talking about that, they all went and did different things. They rejected that very blatantly. They completely rejected that was what was happening in the garden. Were unwilling to accept that it was a heart issue, that it's actually a heart issue in all of us, that that's the problem that needs to be dealt with, that it wasn't just some taboo sin that happened. And very few of them, a couple of them, this guy on the right, Michael, the guy in the middle there in the white hair sitting in the middle, William, just a few of them chose humility instead of total pride and arrogance, and they were willing to allow God to answer their questions, even though they weren't really positive how this was all going to play out once they were faced with that issue in Genesis. So that happened with these guys. We spent a long time really trying to understand how those things were going to play out. As we then moved up into a little spot like this, that little grass roof right there is where we meet as a group, where we would be, where all of their wives could be there and their kids, etc., where that was kind of what we were aiming at with that process. So then in 2022, we started that. So with a group of people, it was the same issue. All the ladies came, and they didn't like Genesis 3. And most of the religious people all responded by going, we know all this stuff. Who are we, little kids? Like we're going to go to Sunday school or something? And most of them chose to do their own thing, kind of stay with their own little religious practices, and didn't really want to understand any more of what God was saying through Scripture. So the small group who did accept what God was saying in Genesis 3 are now still a part of the church. That was the key moment in their hearts to either choose, as Adam and Eve did, total independence, self, I'm the one who is in authority, or humility to allow God to be the one to tell us who he is, who we are, what the issue is, how he solves that issue, how this life even works, what the purpose of it all is. That all happened in that initial early little spot in Genesis. And this is what it looks like. Sitting on chairs, on dirt, with a little fire, with a group of people, usually talking for 3 or 4 hours at a time, a few times a week. So that process looked like about 6 months from Genesis to Revelation. We kind of just laid out the massive overarching narrative that God gives us in Scripture to kind of build the framework. Like imagine going from total confusion, super legalistic law act. It's all about how good of people we are. That's what God accepts or does not accept. That's all of our friends. So we wanted to build a proper framework for what to hang things on, how to view the world, how to understand who God is, who we are, how this works. So that took about 6 months to go from start to finish in the overarching sense of things. Then we just dropped right on into Romans and took about 6 months again in Romans, going super slow through Romans. Initially, it was kind of like narrative, like the whole time. Every time we were getting together, it was something new that God was building into that. Romans, then we took it chunk by chunk and went very slowly through Romans. And eventually then through Ephesians. By the time we left, we had just finished up Ephesians in around Christmas time. And since we've left, the church is now on their own study through Colossians, and now I think they're in Philippians. So it looked like this. We had hung up a whiteboard once we got to Romans, and we wrote out everything. Every word from that translation that we were using, we wrote it out, and we were building in for the church at this point what it looks like to engage with Scripture in a healthy way. Because ultimately our goal, so big picture, our goal is to establish a church in this people group called Konomala that will be able to be healthy and sustain themselves generationally after us. So we wanted to go in, learn their language, understand their culture in order to be able to do that well. And part of what it looked like to equip the church and what it's going to continue to look like equipping the church is giving them the tools that they need to be able to engage with Scripture, being able to grow and feed themselves forever with Scripture, being able to then lead others in that as they continue on in the years to come with us or without us. So we did that. Went really slowly, just observing and answering questions and interpreting and using Scripture to answer questions about Scripture and just teaching a new way to humbly submit to what God was saying and how God reveals the truth in Scripture, which went, I guess, amazingly and also really slowly and messy. But yeah, that was how we spent the last second year of that 2023, pretty much all of that year spent through Romans and Ephesians with them. And this was actually a whiteboard that I had been out for a couple weeks to go get supplies, and they studied 2 sections of Ephesians on their own, wrote the whole thing out, did the whole process, wrote out all their summaries. If we had time, I could read those for you and tell them how they summarized that whole passage in chapter 2, which they did an excellent job of. So that was super cool and super encouraging to see. A lot of our friends having had that religious background, it actually kind of gave them a kickstart into things. As a heart posture changed, then a lot of the stuff that they had thought and heard, a bunch of it was wrong, but the stuff that wasn't necessarily wrong fit into place. So all that religious stuff that they had been hearing now was starting to fit. The ways they had prayed or the ways they would sing songs, now they understood who they were singing to. Now they understood who they were praying to and how this relationship worked. So for the few who were faithful in the church, or who are still faithful in the church, it was profound. Life-changing to the degree that they go, we had no clue. Because we initially, when we were learning language, we started asking ourselves, are these people already kind of Christians? Like, did we come to the wrong place out here? And it threw us off for a while until we then started asking some more questions. And in about 5 minutes, you can find there's no clarity, no gospel. There's Jesus, there's God, but then it's just all confused. And it's just a bunch of names thrown in there. In fact, they take the names from some of their traditional origin stories of their people and just slapped those onto Jesus. They now call Jesus, a bunch of our friends called Jesus Suilik, which is a guy who's in this super crazy story from their ancestors. So very confused, very mixed. But now as there was clarity, a bunch of our friends really got saved right there in Genesis as they accepted what the issue was at a heart level instantly. Oh, that's why Jesus came. Totally get it now. That was the response of a number of our friends. So now we have the joy and the headache and heartache of walking with them through life and allowing God to be working inside of them as they learn what it means to be walking with Him now. Learn what it means to be hearing His Spirit, following His Spirit, submitting to His truth, and engaging with others and bringing others into that same lifestyle of humility under their good Father, empowered by His Spirit, living out the new life of His Son. That is not a fast thing. It's not an easy, clean thing either. But for some of these stories, I'm going to show some pictures. Some of them you will have already heard of. If I've already heard this morning, you remember a couple of names. Just want to give you some faces, names, highlights of our brothers and sisters. Well, some of them not brothers and sisters yet. So that as you hear more of what's happened in Konomala, or as you keep tracking with us when we go back, that you'll have a little bit more connection to who it is that we're with. Because these aren't just like people somewhere over there. We'll see a video in the end that I hope will help kind of solidify what it means. But these are now the people we're singing about. We're singing about worshiping Jesus together. Michael and Raina will be there. And they will be so excited to spend time with all of you. Michael and Raina have been faithful since the first day we moved there. They have protected us. They have helped us. They've taught us. They have spent countless hours asking questions, battling through the things that were happening in their hearts, making decisions to sacrifice a bunch of stuff that is super not normal, to give up money, to give up status, to give up some relationships. There's tons of family. They've been rejected from their family in a lot of ways. They've been rejected in the community. They've been rejected from their old circle of religious friends. They've sacrificed all of it in the name of just wanting to humbly understand, to engage with what God says. And now as they're growing in understanding of who they are in Jesus and who we collectively are in Jesus, profound effects in their life. Hard stuff, not easy stuff, not great stuff, hard stuff for them. And they have faithfully walked through it along with their family. These are all their kids. A couple of these guys are adopted, so they're not all their biological kids, but that's their family that they are now learning what it means to be mom and dad in this context. They're learning how to disciple 20-year-old kids who did not grow up understanding who God was. Right now, actually, Raina is having some major health problems that they're trying to figure out. So yeah, we can be praying for them in that. But this is Raina's mom and dad, William and Ellen. We meet at their house as a church. William, you guys would love William. He is a fireball. He is hilarious and deeply committed to Jesus. His wife Ellen is not. She is deeply committed to not messing up her standing in the little religious world that she lives in. She's also a fireball. But yeah, have too many stories about those guys. But William's like 83, 84 years old. So he's still going strong. This is Ken. Now, this would be the name you might recognize. Last year, Ken was growing a ton while we were in Romans. Growing a ton. This guy was so smart and getting it so well. He was on and off a lot. He would call himself a wiper blade. It's like, I'm on, then I'm off, then I'm on, then I'm off, then I'm on, then I'm off. But we had so much good things happening with Ken. And then if you remember, he got cancer or was diagnosed with cancer. And during the second half of last year, we as a church took care of him while he starved to death, essentially. So that was extremely hard. After he got diagnosed, officially the doctor said, yes, it's cancer. He was still strong enough to be able to stand and talk and do stuff. And he had called out for a little sit-down gathering meal with all the extended family, which for them is a lot. He has 13 siblings. So he's Raina's brother, William and Ellen's son. They're all connected. And he called out for them to come. Everyone thought it was because he was going to tell them he's healed and he's amazing and yay, Jesus. But it wasn't that at all. He said, I have cancer and I'm going to die. And I want to tell you all what is true. And you're all religious people. And I've been religious my whole life. But regardless of what I thought I understood, I would say all this stuff about Jesus, but then I would take all of the life that is in Adam and I was living in that. I was just taking that and slapping Jesus on top of what I wanted. And the Adam life of who I really was, that's what I was living in. And I've been confused my whole life. And you all need to understand. It's not this religious stuff. It's actually an entirely new identity in Jesus. And we can't keep living in the dead Adam life. That was his message. I actually have like a 20-minute long video of him. It's essentially the last thing he was able to say to everyone. From then on, he went downhill pretty terribly. But he was very hopeful. Never once was he, in the final kind of month of his life, was he angry or fearful. He was looking forward to this being done. He was looking forward to how good it was going to be. Really until the final 6 hours where his mind kind of went. He, even in that moment, as it was kind of gibberish at first, he was telling his wife, that the man in white came down and he's going to come get me. And she's like, what are you talking about? He goes, no, it's time to go home. Let's go home. She's like, you can't even sit up. Just lay down and go back to sleep. And he's like, no, he's going to come. It's time. And she said, yo, Seth, what are you talking about? Seth? And he's, no, not Seth. He's down with Seth right now. I was at my house with a bunch of guys. He's down with Seth right now. He's going to come back and get me. And within a very short minutes, within a short period of time, he passed away. And we found out while we were down at the house, we found out. And then his wife was telling us about that afterwards, that the man in white had come and gotten him. So they were all very encouraged by that. So really, till the last moments, he did well, or he was doing well and trusting the Lord and all of that. This is his wife, Ruth, some of their kids. They have actually 8 kids. She was profoundly affected by it all in a good way. And now it's been 6, 7, 8 months. She has pulled away a bit from the church, kind of gone back to a lot of what she's been living in for a lot of years. So struggling a bit now. This lady here, Emma, and her kids, she's another one of the believers in the church, but she has a husband who's a super angry, mean guy who has been really affected by some of those in-laws who were really annoyed at Ken for doing the food thing, and then it didn't end up that he was healed. Why are you talking about Jesus when you haven't been healed? This is a joke. Those guys really got in the ear of this lady, Emma, her husband, Sebastian, and he has pretty much forbidden her from ever associating with anything to do with us. Sebastian was one of our best friends for a long time. So a lot of hard things happening. This guy's name's Joe. This is his quote when he went through something really hard in life, and he realized what was happening in his heart, that he wanted to go get personal vengeance for a thing that had happened, and he realized, I'm just choosing death over and over and over. Like, I just am going to live again in this dead thing that I got that's essentially a self-centered Adam life, like Ken was talking about. And as he was recognizing what was happening in himself, God was working like a overtime in him in that moment. And he chose, instead of following himself, he chose to follow what the Spirit was leading him to do. And he came back down to our house, and that was his quote. He said, all the things you've been leading us to, all the things that essentially God has been leading us to in Scripture, Romans and Ephesians, and the battle that's happening in us, now I know how to fight. I know what the battle is now. I see it, and I know how to walk with Jesus now. Awesome. That was an awesome day, or many awesome conversations with Joe. This is a rough kind of idea of what the church is now. A few of these guys have passed away. A few of them are no longer engaged with the church, but yeah, that's the church. Now, to wrap up a little bit, I have a few-minute video of Michael and Raina. Now, at this point, when we had kind of finished the overarching story of who God is, who we are, how this all is fitting together, we were stepping into Acts. We were engaged, soon to be in Romans. It was a huge deal to all of our friends who became believers to recognize who we are in Jesus now. And then who we collectively, including us right now here. And I don't normally put them on the spot like this, but I kind of wanted to see how it would go. And I set up my phone, and I sat Michael and Raina down. I said, if you do this, I'll give you a cup of coffee. And they love coffee. And I said, if you could speak to all of the churches and all of the people back home that are sending us here, who are making it possible for me, my family, Luke's family to be here, what would you say to them? And they jumped on it. So this is Michael and Raina talking to you. This is what they wanted to tell you. So we'll watch this, and then we can wrap it up. Yeah, like Michael was saying, it's a big thing. Like, this is not a small thing that has happened. Now, it has been hard, and it has been slow, and there is many years ahead of slowness and hardness as we all keep growing together as a church over in Konomala. So as you think of Michael or Raina or William or Ellen or any of these other names that probably you'll see pop up in emails or in little things that we send, you can know them a little bit. You can know them a little bit. You can pray in a way that Think of yourself, the struggles that we struggle with every day. It's the same stuff going on inside. It looks a little different here and there in the way they live or whatever. A couple little differences, but in our hearts, exactly the same. It's exactly the same flesh that we're battling with. It's exactly the same traumas and hardships and grieving that we all feel. It's exactly what our friends deal with there. And as a church, the same kind of struggles, the same kind of conflict or stresses or unknowns in a community or challenges within a community, exactly the same. All of it's the same. And right now, what we're going back to in a few months, in probably November, our family will go back. What Luke and Eleni are stepping back into right now is a life of faithfulness. Just faithfulness now. There's no more steps to accomplish. There's no more language to learn. There's no more special teaching to check off. There's no more stuff to develop. It's now just being together, walking with Jesus together, being faithful in the things that he has for us, faithfully humbling ourselves, faithfully submitting to the things that he wants to do in us, that he wants to do through us as a church. Those are the things we're going back to. And it's actually way scarier right now. We did the easy part. That was all so easy. Looking back on it, it felt huge. It felt unending. The days that we were spending learning language or that we were wondering how they would all respond, that was the easy stuff. And now it's actually way scarier because we have no control over what happens in their hearts. We have no control over how the things that we live now within as a church, how that's going to affect others. Is it going to work? Is anybody going to respond? Is everybody going to just keep rejecting it? Are they going to keep totally afflicting these two? These two are the center of everyone's frustration right now. Major bad things have just happened in the last couple weeks to Raina's sister, like life and death things that she's still in the middle of. And Michael and Raina have essentially been blamed for the whole thing. Hard stuff. So as you think of them, as you think of our two families, the battle is very real and it is very intense. And Satan wants to do whatever he can to knock all of this off, take us out of the game, take them out of the game. He has given them every excuse to give up and bail on this whole thing. Michael and Raina have had thing after thing after thing that Satan is trying to knock them completely out. Just give up. This is too hard. So far, they've faithfully followed Jesus. So thank you. I know I went over. I apologize. We have 4 more hours, according to Roger. But thank you for your faithfulness here to be living in the same mission that we are living within, which is not a geographical thing at all. I'm sure, we're not giving a Matthew 28 sermon. I know you've heard plenty of them. The mission that God has for us is about people, and he wants to do things in us. He wants us to know him, to be needy and come to him for those things. So thank you for your faithfulness in that and your faithfulness to be engaged in this with us. Michael and Raina see it very clearly, I think. They view you in a very critical, important light within the how God has used you in their lives. So thank you.